Hello, I'm Robin. Welcome to Bookspin. Today I'd like to talk about Vigilance by Alan Stroud. This is the third book and the conclusion to the Fractal series. And it's going to be published in September 2024. This is actually a pre-release copy. So I've previously reviewed the first two books on this channel. So if you'd like to learn more about those books, I'll link the reviews to those in the video description. But in the case of Vigilance, the narrative here is very much a direct continuation of the story. So I won't go into any plot specifics here. I don't want to spoil anything. But I will give you a brief overview of this series, the characters that you'll find in this book, and my thoughts on this final part of the trilogy. So this is a fast-paced space opera thriller. It's set in the year 2118. And just like the rest of the series, we've got a very tightly focused and thrilling plot. We've got alternating points of view with chapters narrated from different characters. And there's quite a lot of hard SF elements. It's got quite a realistic vision of future space travel and the technology involved for such space travel. And it's quite a plausible future for humanity as we spread out and colonize the solar system. So in the events of the first book, which is called Fearless, that's this one here, we get introduced to a fleet patrol and rescue ship. And they pick up a distress signal in outer space from a mysterious abandoned space freighter. And when they go to investigate, they get attacked by another ship under quite sort of mysterious circumstances. And then things get pretty crazy from there on out. So that's the first book, and I really enjoyed Fearless. And this is followed by the second book, Resilient, which continues the story, but the narrative gets widened, and a good deal of the action in this book takes place on a Phobos space station, which has been subjected to a hostile takeover by terrorists. And there's a lot more going on besides. But those are the key events really in the first two books. And Vigilance takes off straight away after the events of Resilient. There's quite a lot going on here in this book, and I think it would be difficult for me to summarize the premise in just a sentence or two. But there is one key event revolving around the appearance of this great big enigmatic alien vessel that's been uncovered in Mars's orbit. And the protagonist's efforts to investigate this and see what's going on. So all of these events throughout the series, they're all linked together. And there's a big wider conspiracy going on in the background. And this story is rotated through a cast of different characters. And in this particular book, we've actually got 5 POV characters, which I think may be a bit more than the previous novels, if I remember correctly. But each one of these characters is complex and interesting and believable in their own way. So we've got Captain Alyssa Shan, who's returning as a main character from throughout the series. She was the commander of the fleet ship Kaida, that's the rescue ship from the first novel. And she's quite a robust and complex character. She was born without any legs, which for her actually makes life in zero gravity easier, perhaps, than for other people. We've also got Ensign Avril Johansson, who is a communications specialist and part of Sean's crew, and Ethan Duggins, who's another Qaeda crew member, or former crew member really, because he's no longer really human, but his consciousness has been transferred and survives as a digital entity. And alongside these characters, we've got Natalie Holder, who was a protagonist who was introduced in book 2, and she's quite a complicated character, quite a complicated backstory, and she is the subject of an experiment in consciousness transfer in which she's taken over another person's body through the use of adaptive transmitter implants. So I'll talk more about this in my review of Resilient. But finally we get one new POV character who gets introduced in this book, and that is Colonel Johannes Cervantin, and we get a bit more disability representation with her, as she was born partially blind. So we've got these 5 characters who narrate the story in turn. And there's a whole host of supporting characters besides. So it is actually quite a big cast, and the cast gets bigger with each book. They're all interesting characters, but there are some which I enjoyed reading more than others. And I do think that I would have preferred it perhaps if it had been cut down to just 2 or 3 narrators rather than 5. I think this might have made for a bit more of an intimate narrative. But overall, I did enjoy reading this, and it's a satisfying conclusion to the series. As with the series overall, it's got a very exciting plot, it's got believable characters, and there are some quite compelling ideas. So if you like character-driven hard SF with elements of space opera and military science fiction, this will probably be up your street. And Vigilance ties up quite a lot of loose ends, and I think the series now feels more like a complete story, because the first 2 books end quite abruptly. So I would say this trilogy functions like a single novel in a way, in 3 parts. So if you're going to pick up this series, I think it would be worth reading them back to back, or at least close together. As I found it a little bit difficult at first getting back into this story, because my memory of the plot points from the first 2 books was a little bit hazy. So I found it a little bit confusing sort of getting back into that story. And that's even though I've only read those books a few months ago. But that said, you could just read the first book. So if you've not read any of these books yet, you don't have to read the whole trilogy. I would highly recommend picking up the first book, Fearless, which is definitely my favourite in the series, and I think it would work as a standalone. Then if you want to see where the story develops from there and experience some deeper world building, by all means carry on with the series. So for this book, Vigilance, as a single novel, I don't think it feels quite as fresh and original and bold as Fearless did when I read that. It didn't quite grab me in the same way. And as I said before, I think I might have preferred it if there was a smaller cast of narrators. But it was definitely an enjoyable read overall and a solid conclusion to the trilogy. This is a well-written, ambitious and gripping hard SF thriller, and I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. So thank you for watching. My next read will be Service Model, a new release by Adrian Tchaikovsky, sent to me by the publisher. It's got a very beautiful cover art. I'm very much looking forward to this one. But that's all for today. See you again soon.